Amanda Wilson has spent her life fighting a system stacked against her, but nothing prepared her for the battle in the courtroom. A racist judge and a corrupt system will test her resolve, career, and identity. Every step forward is met with resistance, forcing Amanda to decide how far she's willing to go for justice, for her client, and for herself. You won't believe what happens next. Let's start at the beginning. Amanda Wilson stepped into the courtroom, her heels clicking firmly against the cold, polished floor. The air felt thick, oppressive with expectation. She had been here before, many times in fact, but today was different. Today, she was fighting for Marcus Johnson, a young black man wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. It was the most important case of her career, one that could change the course of her future. And she wasn't going to let anything, nothing, stand in her way. The room seemed to hold its breath as she walked toward the defendant's table. She could feel the eyes of the jury on her, assessing her every move, waiting for her to speak. But instead of the usual nods of acknowledgement, there was a palpable sense of unease, of something darker lurking in the corners of the room. Then there was Judge Harry Martin. His age showed in the way his hair had grayed and his face had hardened with time, but the sharpness in his eyes remained as keen as ever. He was notorious for his tough stance on crime, especially when it involved black defendants. Amanda had known this would be an uphill battle, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. Judge Martin sat at his bench, shuffling through papers with deliberate indifference, as if Amanda and her client weren't even there. His eyes never lifted. He didn't call the case to order, not a single word. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one more agonizing than the last. Amanda's pulse quickened. She cleared her throat softly, trying to pull herself together. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "Your Honor, we are here today. Are you finished?" Judge Martin's voice cracked through the tension, harsh and dismissive. He barely looked up, his tone mocking. "We don't have time for your speeches. You've had plenty of chances to speak already. Let's get this over with." The words landed like a slap. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest, her skin prickling with the sting of his dismissal. She had expected bias, but not this cold, calculated disregard. It was clear now. This wasn't just a case of a judge who was tough on crime. This was a judge who had a history, one that stretched far beyond the courtroom. He had always been known for his prejudice against people of color, and today, she was standing in the eye of that storm. Amanda's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the room shifting against her. The jury's eyes were on her now, but they weren't warm. They were cold, expectant, as if they were already leaning in favor of the prosecution. She could sense the system shifting under her feet, its foundations set long before she even walked in. This wasn't just about one case. It was about everything, about the deep-seated injustice that had brought her to this moment. But she wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not ever. As the trial dragged on, the cracks in Judge Martin's carefully cultivated veneer of professionalism began to show. At first, they were subtle, little things, easy enough to ignore if you weren't paying attention. But for Amanda, every moment felt like a revelation. Each time she spoke, she saw it in his eyes, the narrowing of his gaze, the way his jaw tightened. Each time she raised a point, each time she brought up the undeniable innocence of Marcus Johnson, Judge Martin dismissed her words with a flick of his hand, like he was brushing aside an insignificant fly. His silence was louder than any objection. The facts didn't matter. The evidence didn't matter. To him, Marcus wasn't a young man who had been wrongfully accused. He was a stereotype, a product of his race, guilty by association before even setting foot in the courtroom. But it wasn't just Marcus who stood in Judge Martin's line of sight. It was Amanda, too. She felt it in the coldness of his every glance, in the barely concealed sneer when she objected or made an argument. As a black woman, Amanda had never been allowed to forget that she was expected to stay in her place. She wasn't supposed to be standing here, in this courtroom, fighting against the injustice her client faced. She wasn't supposed to be the one pushing back, demanding fairness. His racism wasn't overt. There were no slurs, no public insults. But it was there, woven into every ruling that seemed to go against them, every condescending tone he used when addressing her. It was in the way he undermined her at every turn, making her feel like an imposter in a system that didn't want her here. Then, during a tense cross-examination, it exploded. "Ms. Wilson," Judge Martin said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade, "I'd suggest you watch your tone. We wouldn't want anyone to think you're playing the race card now, would we?" The words landed like a slap. Amanda's chest tightened. The racism that had been simmering beneath the surface, barely contained, was now out in the open. The truth was undeniable. In that moment, she understood that this wasn't just Marcus on trial. It was her, too. It was every black person who had ever been made to feel small, to feel like they didn't belong in spaces of power. It was the entire system, built to break them down before they even had a chance to fight. Amanda stood tall, her eyes unwavering. She knew the battle had just changed. The stakes had been raised. Amanda's anger rises like a storm. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a personal one. She fights for the lives of those who don't have a voice in this system, for people like Marcus, who have been targeted and oppressed for simply existing. But Judge Martin, with his casual racism and refusal to listen to the truth, represents everything wrong with the system she's trying to change. She holds back tears of frustration, her fists clenched under the table. Every ruling that goes in favor of the prosecution feels like a punch to her gut. The judge allows every biased piece of evidence to slip through, dismissing any evidence that would exonerate Marcus. And yet, Amanda knows she can't lose herself to rage. Not yet. But when she sees Marcus's mother, eyes red from crying, she knows what she has to do. She takes a deep breath and steels herself. This fight is bigger than her, bigger than Marcus, bigger than Judge Martin. The turning point comes when Amanda uncovers a critical piece of evidence, a set of emails linking Judge Martin to an anti-black hate group. The emails are damning, and it becomes clear that Martin's bias against black defendants has shaped his entire career. With this, Amanda has the key to not just Marcus's freedom, but to exposing the corruption that runs deep in the system. The moment she presents the evidence in court, the room falls silent. Judge Martin's face drains of color as his own words turn against him. The emails show not only his personal animus, but also his active participation in blocking fair trials for black defendants. His connection to the hate group is undeniable. It's not just a legal victory, it's a personal one. Amanda stands tall, her voice unwavering as she demands justice for Marcus. The judge, once so arrogant, is forced to recuse himself from the case, and the trial is declared a mistrial. Marcus is released, and the case is handed to a new judge, one who will treat it with the fairness it deserves. As Amanda walks out of the courthouse with Marcus's mother and the community that has supported them, she feels a deep sense of satisfaction. The battle isn't over, and there will always be more fights to win. But today, justice has been served. And for Amanda, that is the only thing that matters.